call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. We'll begin with a roll call.
Ms. Drummond. Ms. Drummond is joining us on the phone. Mr. Trainey?
Here.
Mr. Honeman?
Here.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Honor to be here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Johnston? Here. Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Trombley?
Here.
Ms. Osiander? Mr. Flynn? And Mr. Birch?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? We move into special orders 4A, certification of the regular municipal election for April 3rd, 2012.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this is Ms. Drummond speaking. I would like to move to add an agenda item to allow audience participation after the reports and before debate and discussion and the vote by the Assembly.
Second.
At the discretion of the chair and direction of council, I'm not going to honor that, and Mr. Patuminas will explain that at a later time here in the meeting.
Mr. Hall, how can you shut
Ms.
out the
Johnson.
citizens of this city? How can you sit there and say that you're not going to allow us to testify and give our opinions about how this election is going to be run?
We're going to have order.
How dare you?
We're going to have order in this meeting.
Citizens of your city that you've been elected to represent, and you're going to shut us out?
Security.
I'm not going anywhere. I want to have my opinion.
I move to change the order of the day.
Testifying. I'm testifying right
I'm moving to change the order of day. I'd like to have 4A2 come before 4A1.
This is wrong. This is
Second.
an absolute
Second.
travesty.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
It's undermining the entire democracy by not allowing us to speak.
We have a motion on the floor to change the order. Do we have consensus? Seeing and hearing, thank you. I want to begin. This is a special meeting of the Assembly. It's special because we are here on a beautiful Thursday evening instead of a Tuesday evening under our regular meeting schedule. Our single topic this evening is confirmation of April 3rd municipal election. This is a topic of immense public concern here in Anchorage and elsewhere. As this body's newest Assembly Chair, it is my task to lead this body through a suite of complicated processes associated with this election. Some of these processes we have taken for granted or have not been recent occasion to think deeply about or put to use. With our constituents, voters, election workers, clerk's office, formal advisors, and informal advisors, such as Jeff Mittman with the ACLU, we have been reminded how vitally important and fundamentally vital it is for this body, the Assembly, to assure our election structure is adequate to meet the needs of our community, to ensure the needs of our community are known and correctly anticipated, to make sure training and resources are available. Contingency planning is understood, undertaken, supervised, so the contingencies are reasonably met and there is a recovery plan. It is going to take time to complete everything that we need to take care of. Each of us, as well as the community, is getting an education. The April 3rd election has shaken our community in ways that I haven't seen before, and I've been an active member of this community for 50-plus years. I know it's hard for the public to understand why we don't immediately do this or that. Some of us have the same questions. Title 28 is our election code. It's a process guide. It is grounded in state law, federal law, and court decision. In our eagerness to make amends, to immediately fix the problems, to respond to public outrage, disappointment, and concern, to advance solutions. In our eagerness to do all of these things, as of yesterday, we cannot abandon our process. We must not lose sight of our duty to follow the law. At the request of this body, the Municipal Attorney's Office provided us some great tools, including precedent from 1989, court cases, and updated analysis. At my request, Tim Petumenis is here tonight from the Anchorage law firm of Birch, Horton, Bittner, and Chereau as independent counsel to the Assembly. Last week, I asked if he could assist us tonight. In addition to being here this evening, Tim was able to prepare and deliver a written report to the municipal clerk before noon today. All of you up here with me were sent copies of the report. For the public, it is posted on the municipal website, and it has been available to the media. In addition to lending his independent opinion to the matters before us, I asked him to help us understand why the law doesn't allow the Assembly to make discretionary decisions on certification of this election in the way we take action on ordinances. Tim is a member of the American Law Institute, a nationally recognized organization of legal scholars, attorneys, and judges who think and write about laws and public policy. So before we hear from the Election Commission and entertain discussion among ourselves, I want to hear from Tim. Tim will come forward. Tim, will you come forward to the podium? Formally introduce yourself for the clerk's record by stating your name and spelling your last name, and then please tell us where we find ourselves at this juncture. I think Tim's comments will be helpful to the public understanding as well. We will also have time for Assembly members' questions. Tim,
Mr. Chairman.
the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Before we start, I'd like to state a potential conflict of interest.
Yes.
My wife is a member of Mr. Petumenis' firm.
Mr. Flynn, I was made very much aware of that, and this contract was written in such a way that your wife was totally outside of the scope, so you will be allowed to vote.
Thanks a lot.
You are welcome. You are directed to vote. Mr. Petumenis.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let me begin by dealing with the technicalities. My name is so easy to pronounce and spell. Timothy Petumenis, P-E-T-U-M-E-N-O-S, from the law firm of Birch, Horton, Bittner, and Chereau. Thank you all for what is a very important and most interesting assignment today. A lawyer in my position is bound, I think, under these circumstances to put his feet in the shoes of his client and say to his client, and think about with his client, what do they face today? How can I help them understand what their duties are, and then step back, for I hold no office, and let you do your work. It is a very, very important thing you do today. Often it is a ministerial thing that happens so fast that we don't even know why it is we do it. But the principles that underlie an election certification, and I hope today not just to talk about the procedures which were adequately laid out by the Municipal Attorney's Office, which did a more than adequate job and an accurate job in advising you, but to address some of the reasons why we do what we do. And I endeavored in my report to talk about some of those reasons. When an election is certified, it is not unlike the time-warranted concession speech of the losing member or the losing candidate in an election. The time after an election is one of the most fragile times in a democracy. The United States has been held up as a model in the world for the ability to peacefully transcend and transfer power through the electoral process. But what happens when that electoral process is somehow impeached or challenged? Well, one of the things that is for sure is we better have a set of laws and procedures in place before the election result is known, lest the contesting and the process of determining whether the election is fair itself lacks credibility. For this reason, your roles today are a bit different than they normally are, for you are more like judges, and we rely upon the existence of a case or controversy to come before you, so that in the process of preparing an election contest and a commission report, you have in front of you a finite set of facts and contentions that you as judges can hear. Following a problem such as this, there is a mountain of information from a number of sources. But we know that as judges, we're not permitted to stop the judge on the street and make our important decision on an election based upon what this judge heard in a coffee shop or what that judge got in an email. But there is some structure surrounding your deliberations. And that's what your laws say. One of the quotes I gave you in this report is from a member of the American Law Institute, a Professor Edward Foley, who is the foremost expert in the United States on election law. He is at this moment with the American Law Institute the person appointed nationally to rewrite and modernize the election laws, and he was kind enough to spend a good amount of time with me in this difficult but interesting assignment. And when I read some of what he wrote, with some of which you have in your report, he noted that there is some obvious force to the idea that even one vote, even one disenfranchised voter, and we often hear politicians say this, is one too many. But the experience of election after election is such that that election does not exist. There is no perfect election. So then where does this leave you? Our system provides for an election commission. And I have read in the media and elsewhere that the commission lacks the expertise to do what they do here today when they present their findings to you. But that reflects a lack of understanding in the way our democracy works. Because we have opted in our system for citizen involvement, haven't we? Grand juries, petty juries, people from the citizenry without regard to whether they have this degree or that degree, advise us and make factual findings on the most important affairs in our democracy. Murder, antitrust cases, complex commercial disputes are resolved. So the fact that we have a citizen commission to advise the Assembly today on whether this election should be certified is no stranger to our system of democracy. Other countries have decided otherwise and don't have jurors, but only judges who are skilled in the law. That's not our system. And I noted in my report that the one fundamental constitutional principle behind election certification that the federal courts have ever used with regularity to interfere with a state and local election is changing the rules after the election is over from what they were before. You can't do it. It's not fair. We start with the rules and we end with the rules. So where we are today is that the Commission has issued their findings, and they have recommended to you under the standard that both I and the Mr. Attorney's Office have told you exists, that it must be malconduct that affects the election result before you can fail to certify. They've made their finding, and under the law, any aggrieved candidate, any 10 voters, can come in and contest their finding. And there you have it, don't you? Your case of controversy is set. We know what the contention is. We either listen to the contestant and the commission and make our decision, or if we're not ready, we can take evidence to resolve the matter. And as I stand before you today, with all of the controversy and all of the issues that have attended this election, and all of the people that have listened to it, we sit today with not one contest before the Assembly. And that's significant. In our offices, we tried to imagine a scenario where the Assembly would fail to certify an election in the absence of a single election contest. And we could. If the citizens that made up the commission did something terribly egregious or something terribly corrupt and it came to your attention, you'd be duty-bound to say it. But absent extraordinary circumstances, this body would be vulnerable to legal attack by those candidates who properly won the election and those propositions and bonds and construction projects that properly passed, because there is a duty to certify, just as there is a duty to order a new election when the time comes. That standard is met. As we started this meeting, we heard from a citizen anguish, concern, anger, worry. Does this mean that what I've told you today means that the public cannot be heard, that the Assembly cannot respond, that you cannot react to your constituents, that you cannot do the things that probably many of you in your hearts are yearning to do? No, it doesn't mean that. Because in addition to the hats you wear as judges tonight, in the certification of the election, you do not lose your power to reform, to rewrite the laws. The agencies that run the elections are subject to your direct supervision, and you can change them. You can change the personnel. You can change the way it works. You can allocate further resources. You can do all of these things. And when you do so, you're unfettered by these rules. The election's behind you. It's certified or it's not. And the people who want to address you, or an investigator you appoint, or any aspect of your legislative and supervisory function that you wish to entertain, is wide open. All I have attempted to do in my report today is to segregate those two hats that you wear and those two forms of authority that you have so that you may exercise them properly. By no means do I mean to suggest to you that any citizen who wishes to bring their concerns to you or to your designee is to be shut out. But they cannot interfere with the quasi-judicial process that attends your duty tonight. And I am prepared to take any questions you have about any of the foregoing.
I would like to start with having you clarify this one thing for me. We often have public testimony on certain agenda items in regular meetings, and we have audience participation at the end of the agenda, and may have pre-docketed appearance requests on items from a member of the public. And from time to time, we call on members of the administration or others in the room who may have input for us in making decisions. Can you guide us in that area for today? I know the public wonders about this, and it's one of the items I see in your report. It is important for us to understand, and this deserves restatement. So if you would, please.
The process of certifying elections is set with respect to a very specific timetable, with a very specific procedure, for the purpose of acting swiftly and acting on the basis of evidence, and essentially controlling the quality and nature of the evidence that comes forward. For that reason, much like a court, a citizen who wants to contest the certification of an election can't do so anonymously, can't do it in a letter to the editor. He signs a formal election contest if he's a candidate or she's a candidate, and if it is a citizen, they too can challenge the certification process, but there must be 10 of them. They must file within 5 days. They must put their names to it in public and be prepared to back up their claims. In this way, When facts come out and people are worried and the rumors fly, they may go to a lawyer, they may think about it themselves, they may become educated about the legal test that applies, and they may think about it and they may say, I can't prove it. And they don't file. Or they go through that process and the quality of the analysis comes up and the quality of the evidence gets better, and they do file. And now we know what the contest is. Is it voter disenfranchisement? Is it because voters didn't get to vote? Is it because a ballot was counted that shouldn't? And we focus our efforts. It is antithetical to that sort of a system that we take our information in chaos. It doesn't mean, in the second part of our role as Assembly members, to reform and to supervise and to do all of that you can't take that information, sift it, understand it, under circumstances where the election may not be invalidatable, and make it better. Mr. Chairman, am I answering your question?
Yes. Mr. Trainee.
No, you got the question answered I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tim, you've been extremely helpful in this work for us, and I know you did it on a tight schedule. There may be questions later in the evening, and I hope you'll make yourself available to help us work our way through this.
I have no intention of walking out.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to hear a motion on certification so that we may hear from the Election Commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I was in
Trainee.
line for that, sorry. I move to certify the April 3rd, 2012 election, subject to the outcome of the requested recount.
Very good. Mr. Trombley, you're still the second.
You are.
Second. Okay. We've got a motion and a second. At this time, I'd like to have Gwen Matthews come to the podium, introduce the commission members, and we'll handle questions with you. You know, Gwen, you're fine there. That'll be fine.
Hello, I'm Gwen Matthew. I'm chairman. Is that on? Can you hear me? I am chairman of the Election Commission. At my right is Alice Hanley, Sue Kinney, Barbara Mishler. To my left is Jim Stevens, Bonnie Babb, Jean Abel, and Peggy Baumeister.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge receipt that the Commission provided us AM 231. And with that, I would ask, do members of the Assembly have questions of the Commission? Ms. Osiander.
I particularly appreciated the recommendation section. A lot of them of your recommendations were items that are already on my to-do list, but I wanted to get a little more information about a couple of them. On the first one, you recommended that there be a change in the formula for ballots ordered. I didn't know that was a problem. I thought the problem was delivered, not necessarily on hand. Could you amplify that first recommendation a little bit?
In our opinion, according to our research and investigation, the big problem, probably 90%, if not more, was an incorrect formula that was applied to order the ballots. And that's what we addressed.
So they weren't, I thought they were on hand down at City Hall. So you're saying
there's a lot of information that has been distorted or not even mentioned, that there are 34 different ballot styles
in the
election. And a formula was applied to order 70% of the total election. But it was a miscalculation of the formula, and what we needed was 70% of each precinct. Because in a mayoral election this year, there was a ton of precincts that required card 4, and that was under-ordered, whereas we had other cards available, but they weren't the appropriate cards. And that's why some of the machines balked when you put in your card and it spit it back out, it was the wrong card. And the AccuVote machine is programmed to accept only that precinct's card.
Okay, so you're saying it should be 70% of the total voters in each precinct?
Yes, of each precinct.
Okay, and then if you could also clarify number 9 on your recommendation list, that we publish and distribute more detailed general voting information.
We realized that there is a huge deficit in normal voters in the city of Anchorage, that they really do not know a lot of information appropriate to the elections, like where to vote. Some of that stuff is standard, but how we go about this, when you have to be registered. For instance, one question that we came up with numerous times was a person, I've been living there for 20 years. Well, unfortunately, if you came from Wasilla and you did not re-register to vote in Anchorage, you're not registered to vote in Anchorage.
So information on the process rather than the content.
And even there has been a lot of distortions, a lot of misinformation, a lot of partial information, and I think that the voters of Anchorage are totally confused right now. And I think what we had in mind was a brochure that sent out to every voter or every household in Anchorage that would delineate some of this information.
Okay. My last question, Mr. Chairman. I've been learning a lot about Diebold machines, a term I frankly was not at all familiar with a short time ago. Can you describe a little bit of how do we know these machines work? How did you look at these machines? We've heard stories about seals being broken. How did you even begin to look at that question?
As I said, as a workstation, the work session that you had originally, I was chairman of the AccuVote testing board that every year takes each machine from each precinct and runs cards through them appropriate to that precinct in every possible voter formation of any way that someone could vote. They're run through this machine. It takes us several days, groups of 2 doing this, and we certify them. I have never in all that time, I've been doing elections about 8 years, 7 to 8 years. I did 4 or 5 years under Lupe. This is my 3rd year with Jacqueline. Never in that time has any machine spit out a wrong answer. They are amazing machines. They will note any kind of little tear, any kind of little mark on the ballot. That's why we transfer ballots that were mismarked or just maybe your pen caught it when you were voting. We transfer them to the same ballot so that every single one of your votes counts, and that's part of our process. Our job is quite substantial. Back to the Diebolds. In 2003 in California, some court, I can't remember what it is, they ruled that the Diebold machines were not good for elections. But that is the touch screens in California. These are much different. The touch screens, they had software, firmware, hardware issues, which, by the way, were resolved. But these machines are simple scanning machines and counters. They're very basic. The only security risk would be the memory card that is in each Diebold machine. Through the years, I have worked elections as well, and they do occasionally come off. I mean, part of our procedure is the night of the election, we take the memory cards out of the Diebold machines along with the tapes, the zero report tapes and the election results, and we put them in their own envelope, and we take them to City Hall, and we hand them to the people who do all that stuff. So it's not unusual for the security seals to break because they're supposed to that night. If you're concerned about the security of this, you have to have a motive, you have to have opportunity, you have to have expertise to program that card. Plus, I don't think they sell that kind of equipment at Radio Shack. I think it's rather specialized. These machines are overnighted, but I think it's unreasonable to assume that someone would want to break into that many precinct chairman houses and get away with it and have no trail of that. Well, one last thing.
Okay.
These machines are easy to check because they have a paper trail. You can have another machine programmed with, and by the way, Jacqueline programs these. She's the only administrator. She has an observer when she does it. And you can run through the same ballots through that machine. It has a paper trail, which was a factor of the court case in California.
I'm sorry, what I was trying to focus on is specifically what you did for these machines this time. Did every machine get tested that we used in this last election?
Same as usual. And by the way, we had no report at all anywhere of a seal being broken. That was not a concern, at least at the time of the chairman's reports or the interviews that we held.
Okay. I was under the impression that one seal was broken. You found no seals broken?
In our interviews, in the emails that came in all of that, we did not have any report of that. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
That's a lie.
I'm not.
I reported it. I reported it to her on
Order.
Shack Library. I reported broken seals.
Security.
Obviously, you threw that away.
No. We did not throw that away, but that is hearsay. That was hearsay. It was not a personal chairperson.
I was there. I saw it. It's a lie. I reported it as I was supposed to report it, and they didn't give it to you or you didn't write it down.
Security.
Okay. I'm such a threat.
Are you done, Ms. Osiander?
Well, I know that however this evening goes, there'll be more discussion about these machines, and I'm actually eager to look into that a little bit further. So,
Thank you. Mr. Honeman.
Yes, I know that there was reported in one of our meetings regarding the election that there was one precinct where there was a medical emergency and they weren't able to open on time. There was also reports that perhaps one or two polling places closed early or locked the doors early. Was that, it's not in your report, was there any findings to that at all?
We have interviews with them. Jacqueline, on the original notebook that you received, on the pages after the reports of the ballots being ordered, there is the comments from each chair as to whether they opened or closed. There were a couple that closed their doors for a while, but we reviewed that, and we had several voters that came. There is a question, and this is perhaps a legal question, that if someone meets you at your car and says, we have no more ballots, we suggest that you go to this precinct. That is, according to the legal counsel that we received, that is not an act of disenfranchising. That is, in fact, enfranchising the person to go vote.
I'm speaking directly to a physical act of locking a door saying, we have no more material for you to vote here, either with a sign on the door or otherwise. Were there any reports of that?
I heard some hearsay on that, and I was expecting public interviews to confirm that, but they didn't. I reviewed all the interviews last night, and I couldn't find one that said that.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One is, you had some special responsibilities this time, and I think you were guided, or how were you guided by the 1989 experience of the ballot shortages?
For the past number of years, the function of this board was to simply count ballots, to verify question, absentee, and mail-in ballots, and then to run them through the AccuVote machine. The duties this year are greatly expanded. I think they were always there. They just weren't necessary before. I forgot part of your question. What was that?
Just how you were guided by the 1989 experiences of ballot shortages.
We were given a copy of their report and their findings at the end of their thing. We were also given some considerations by the legal counsel for the Muni, as well as the legal counsel for the Assembly. So we had that template to look at. Very similar concerns. It was very similar.
When you were reviewing this time, you reviewed the limited ballot shortages. Can you give some examples of that?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't. Was the Commission's review this time on limited ballot shortages? And can you give some examples?
Okay. If I understand your question correctly, we interviewed precinct workers, precinct chairs especially, in the public meetings. We didn't get a big turnout, so we continued that investigation by calling those precinct chairmen of, according to the report, had run out of ballots, and we targeted those ones that ran out of ballots rather than just everybody, and we talked to a great deal of them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Now, the Commission's report is a summary, and there are items and documentations the Commission looked at which are not attached to the report. It might be helpful for us to spend time allowing you folks to share some of what you did and the volumes of concerns forward to you. Your attention.
We did all of these interviews. We also interviewed the staff, the municipal clerk staff. We interviewed all of the boards that work in the Muni during the election that mail out the mail-out boards and that verify that they're voters, that help the night of the election, that all of those, anybody we could think of that was there, we interviewed these people. We had to divide up because there was a huge amount of work to be done. We divided in teams in these interviews. We never interviewed just one-on-one. We were always in groups. We had to tally those sheets, and several of our members tallied the ones of the in-person interviews we did. We tallied the emails that we received, and then we conferred together, and if we had more questions, we went back to the drawing board and ferreted out more information to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say again, as I did at a prior meeting, thank you very much for your work. Appreciate your service. But you made a statement that the Diebold machines are amazing machines, and I'm sure some of my colleagues may have seen some of the videos that I've seen because they've been out there. And I saw actual example of how they really aren't that amazing. And so I'd like to hear your response to that.
I still stand by that. They're very amazing. They're very amazing machines. I also, because one of the interviews with a voter confronted me and said that I should look on YouTube and that I should look at this site and that site, which I did. And I found that they were very dramatic, but they really didn't prove anything. Yes, anything can be, I mean, you can reprogram a card, you can hack into it, but as I said, did they have motive? Did they have opportunity? Did they have the expertise as well as the machinery to do that? And we found no grounds to assume that they had.
Thank you.
Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Matthew, for all your hard work. I know this has been an extraordinarily long process for the Elections Commission. You have been working on elections in Anchorage, you said, for about 8 years?
7 or 8 years, yes.
That's correct. So you worked on elections when the Data Processing Review Board was active on double-checking the optical scanners.
Yes.
Why was that Data Processing Review Board eliminated?
I was there that day that they came in, and they didn't like the way that things had been changed. They still were on board, but they did not like the way that it was set up, and they basically quit. And I don't believe, what I understand is that they did the same thing as the AccuVote testing board in terms of running all those cards that are marked in every way that's possible for a race to be voted. And they did the same kind of stuff. The only thing that I've recently found out that they did in addition to that was that they spot checked the night of the election several different races and would see that the AccuVote testing tally was the same as what they found. They were, yeah.
Okay, so you said that the Data Processing Review Board members actually quit functioning, basically.
Yes, I was there.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if we would add that to our investigation when we undertake that.
So noted.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing Ms. Osiander.
One more. Did you have any minority opinions on this? I see all the signatures there, but were you unanimous in this recommendation?
Yes, we were.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, this is on the floor for discussion among the members. Any member comments? Mr. Starr.
And this is to the main motion of certification. Well, first off, again, I can't say thanks to those that citizen volunteers and those. I know you do get paid, but for the code, I think it's still $12 an hour, and it's pretty minimal for the stress load that goes with the job. So thank you to the Commission all for your time spent, and hope you continue to partake. You learn a lot as you gain the experience, and we'll need that. But Mr. Chairman, I also thank you for kind of taking the leadership. I'm not sure that I would have done anything different up to now. And I think that you inherited the seat through our election of you to provide that leadership and that structure. And I'm appreciative of how quick you studied up and sort of got your arms around a very sticky wicket. And that's also a compliment, but an expectation that you'll continue to do your best to provide organization and structure to the way forward, and we'll help you with that. Mr. Wheeler also, and again, I put that out because of the efforts early on that provided some of the structure. Your almost instantaneous definition of malconduct, for example, gives me comfort that you had your mind in the game as it relates to the answers and the description of what Chapter 28 provides to us. I think that there's two kinds of good legislators in the world that we have here as elected, and I don't think any of us call ourselves professional politicians, although some of us stay in the game a lot longer. I've learned early on that you can look to our municipal code often for what you need, but I've also learned that it's oftentimes very lacking. I learned that through the fiscal dilemmas and the financial challenges that we faced early on, and I see it again now. And I think my comments about good legislators go there first, because that's the law. That's what we do here is that, and the legal's there. We don't have a lawyer on our body this time around, but those lawyers are valuable to us up here when they're elected to this office because they know to go there as well. I think the other good legislators, Senator Stevens and some of the others that are in existence still to this day, Mr. Traney comes to mind, they also know how to change law and rewrite law so it becomes better, sometimes more restrictive, clearer, and a better guiding document to those who will follow us. And I think that's a second challenge that we have. So the interpretation of Chapter 28 as it relates to tonight and the inference to that makes me want to be a better legislator. I profess to be a good and fair businessman, as well. That's what I do. My vocation is business. With that comes employees. And I will say one of my skills is, in fact, to empower those folks, to provide them the tools that they need to do their job and do it well. And I did not do that in this case. I take responsibility for that, not solely, but I take responsibility in our oversight requirements of the clerk's office. I apologize that I didn't fulfill my role in that capacity. It's not my style to be hands-off. It's not my style to have my pulse on what's important, and I did not do that well. Was there insufficient performance in that department? Yes, just like there was here with me. And I can't tell the community in any better and more succinct ways how that bothers me. It keeps me up at night, but I'm pledged to do better in that. And I think that's the way forward that I speak to. They won't be conciliatory statements of that. We're still having a need to take action. We still need to provide social glue that keeps our democracy together. But I pledge to be a better legislator and a better oversight person as I was elected to do. I intend to certify the election question tonight for those very reasons. And I can go on, but when you do the homework at the level that we do, and I do, you read very clear statements, very clear limitations on what we can and can't do. Call for a redo. We need a new election. We need all that. Okay, can we do that? The answer clearly, and it is a legal question because that's the law. Chapter 28 will tell you these things and what we're allowed to do. And any of the measuring sticks have to have the opportunity to affect the outcome of the election. And I've not had that. There's many more measuring sticks. There's many more chapters and titles in Chapter 28 that you utilize, recount procedures, when you judge and how you rate malconduct, the criterion for reckless, Dennis knows the question, but reckless performance, intentional or otherwise, I measure that. But again, it's very clear what our role is, and I've spent many hours reading my homework, doing listening, and I really appreciate Mr. Hall for putting all of that in front of us as I needed the information. So again, I leave it at that. I plan to certify, and we'll get on with the next part of what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Flynn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of hearken back to the meeting of April 10 when you, I think very correctly on our behalf, apologized and noted that we failed you, meaning we failed our election commission, we failed our poll workers, we failed our clerk's office, and we failed our citizenry. And they're reasonably and appropriately upset. And there are things that we can do, I think, to try and regain their trust. Some of the ones that have been mentioned are as an independent investigation. And I know you've been working very diligently to get that started. It turns out you can't call down to the temporary staffing agency and find a retired judge that easily. Another thing we could do is a hand recount, either in total or in part. And you tried to do that, and our covey of lawyers told you you couldn't. And so we had to wait till a group of citizens banded together to come forward and seek that. And then we're told, well, that's not good enough. You have to vote to certify anyway. And then, of course, there's the option of a revote, and we're told we couldn't do that even if we wanted to, which I'm not sure I would. So I'm stuck in a very difficult position here. I can either vote to uphold the law, or I can vote to uphold what's right. Because the law currently is wrong. I'll say this on the chair's behalf. Applause really isn't appropriate, even though I appreciate it. So, Mr. Chairman, I understand how Mr. Starr and others can review the materials and choose to vote to certify. I think that's a very defensible position, but for me, it's not. And so I'm going to have to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Horniman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, too, want to thank the Election Commission. And I'd like to extend even further to the poll workers who gave of their day in what turned out to be a fairly controversial day. It wasn't as smooth as the elections that I participated in. It's not lost on me that every spring, the first Tuesday in April by our code, since at least since the early 90s, we've been having an election every year. And it runs in 3-year terms, and it's 1-year mayor, and the second year it's 5 on the assembly, and the following year it's the third year it's the 6 remaining assembly members. And so every year we have an election, every spring. And I know that you mentioned you worked 7 or 8 elections, under, you named the staffs. And, some of the folks that are in the clerk's office are familiar and some aren't, but it's not a mystery. Every year we should be prepared to hold an election. And I think Mr. Tuminous mentioned that we're human, we hire human beings, and oftentimes to err is human. We know that. We account for that, and certainly we accept it to some level. I echo the comments from Mr. Hall and from Mr. Starr and Mr. Flynn that we did fail. I think most people who know me on this body, and I've heard from a couple of folks who call me as the good government guy. That's all I've ever wanted is good government that's responsive and works for you. And we failed you in a lot of ways, in a cataclysmic way, I believe, very catastrophic. Particularly when we thought maybe it was under 50%, but now we see it was more than 50% of the precincts ran out of ballots, and that's just not excusable. And so I am one of those elected officials, not politicians, but that say that any one voter who is disenfranchised is one too many. If you didn't get a vote, and I know of a couple who told me personally that they sent their absentee ballot in and was sent a letter saying they were not able to be found, and yet they were a lifelong Alaskan and have been registered a long time. I've also heard from a couple of people who say that they were in precincts where the doors were locked, and it was nothing more than a panic from the poll workers who didn't know and were taking a bevy of complaints from people who didn't get material to vote on. And what do you mean? I came to my precinct. This is my precinct. I want to vote. And even though they were maybe even been a short period of time, they were locked out. Some people were locked out, and it wasn't until someone reminded them that, look, the poll place was supposed to be open until 8, and they were told, yes, they need to unlock the door again, and they'll get that remedied right away. So these may be anecdotal and maybe hearsay, as Ms. Matthew mentioned, but they're real people who came to us as the role of Mr. Tuminous as a representative of their government and gave us that information. So let's talk about the code for a minute. I believe the code itself is founded on the premise that government, the body, defend itself from the masses, the people who are expecting us to do the right thing. And I think Mr. Flynn hit it right. It's tough to make a decision that goes against something that's written in language. But the language, I believe, and again, you can find attorneys to argue either side, when it says malconduct or fraud, these are two items, language listed in the code in Title 28 of reasons not to certify. But it has further language. Continues on, it says, to the extent that would substantially change the outcome of the election. And that, I believe, goes directly to a Supreme Court ruling from a 1989 case, or even before that. And so the code itself, I believe, was somewhere along the way revised, and I think Mr. Flynn hit it on. It's bad code. I think there's bad language in the code. Even if this assembly body wanted to, I don't believe we have the authority listed in the code to do anything other than certify the election based on what we've been presented to us so far. So what do? We hire a government attorney. We spend government money, and it's not government money, it's the taxpayers' money, to defend ourselves as a government body against the people who really want us to do the right and tough thing to do. And I find a little irony in that. So the question is upon us: do we follow the rule of law, or do we follow the will of the people? And there are times, and maybe now is not the time, but there will be time to remedy the code at a later point. We follow the law as it is listed, and I am struggling even to the very minute I'll push my vote as to which way I land, but to follow the rule of law is probably at this time more important than to make sure we do follow the premise of the election process. And I thank you for the comments, the allowed time to do the comments, and I thank you all for turning out. And more than anything, I really hope that we can get even higher numbers to turn out at every election, because even still, I think we were somewhere around, I don't believe correct me if I'm wrong, looking at the numbers, I don't believe we set a precedent of a higher turnout this time than we did last mayoral race. So, and I thank you for your time.
Mr. Birch.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank the election workers. You guys have just done a superb job here, and the outreach and the recommendations are going to be very helpful as we move forward in the process of making modifications to the code as we may need to in the future. Also like to recognize and thank the many poll workers. I know where I vote, we all often see many of the same folks, familiar faces every year, and it's a full day engagement, and much appreciated by everybody in the community. Also, would like to thank the clerk's office for the effort and the outreach and the training. And obviously, there's always room for improvement, but it really takes a lot of folks to make a successful election. And I think the real challenge we had here was there was a mistake. As I indicated to a constituent who did not get a chance to vote, he and his wife basically they couldn't spend the time waiting for a ballot to show up. I just told him it was a monumental screw up, and I apologized. And and we'll do our best to improve on that next year, next process, next election cycle. I have not seen what I would characterize as any evidence of conspiracy. I haven't seen any indication that, as unfortunate as it is when even one person does not have an opportunity to vote, I haven't seen where any significant changes. I think the closest contest was around 8,000 votes, if I remember the numbers right. So, from a looking at the numbers, there's not going to be any material change. And lastly, I want to thank Mr. Patuminis for his good efforts in looking at this matter and the legal aspects of our code and really what our duties and obligations are. But I'm going to be voting yes to certify this election because it's the right thing to do. We've elected 3 candidates to the school board. I actually spoke with one at a Rotary Club yesterday. She characterized herself as a TAM, Costa Giesler, characterized herself as a lady in waiting. I think the indications were that, there's no assembly seats in this cycle. The school board's really at risk. I mean, they're short 3 positions because they haven't been because their seats actually terminate with the election. So we do have a duty. I think we've done a lot of work. We have more work to do, and I will be a yes vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. As everybody here knows, it's the Assembly's responsibility to hold elections and have staff to do that. And it's also our responsibility to certify the election. And it's one of our biggest responsibilities, frankly, folks. And I'll again like to say thank you to the Elections Commission and frankly, thank you to everybody who was involved with this election. And I also want to thank everybody in the audience, and I want to thank the 350-plus emails that we got from citizens in this community that were very, very upset. You know, our citizens have simply been disenfranchised. That's the bottom line. I don't care how you say it, but, our election integrity has been breached, period. Our election was not run competently. That's just the way it is. And, it's about having courage and integrity. And I listened, and I really thank you, Mr. Patumis, is that how you pronounce it, for your report and your comments regarding to those of us who may not vote to certify the election. I appreciate that. But it's about courage. And frankly, when I took my oath as an Assembly member, I took an oath to represent the people in this community, period, to the best of my ability. And I have the ability this evening to simply do the right thing. And the right thing is to not certify this election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please. Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all see these things differently. And to Election Commission, thank you very much. We don't pay you enough. I don't think you get paid, period. But nonetheless, this is overtime. I've seen a lot of these elections. And this is definitely overtime. Thank you very much for putting your time and effort into this. In meeting with the public, because I was here that Saturday to see people come in to talk to you. It's a good chance for the community to talk to you about the election, how it worked. And to our clerks, thank you for a very good job. I know you didn't enjoy it. I know it wasn't easy, but it wasn't your fault. Things happened. I mean, if you take a look at Title 28, if you read 28.50.190, closing the polls, we need to maybe put that on all the polls, because it says if you're there to vote, you're either inside or outside the building, you'll be allowed to vote. So maybe we need to put that as one of the things we can do with our committee on the building where the polls are at, so people know. But when we take a look at the law, we've got to certify this election tonight. It's the only real thing we can do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trini. Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Batumis, I have a couple questions for you. I'd said that right?
You did.
Okay. From your report, you do stress and you emphasize that there's always the favorability placed, whether in court or just on an election, that it was done properly and that it is valid, and that the burden of proof in any contest is very, very high. And since there's been no contest filed, is it fair to presume that meeting that burden couldn't be found or that it doesn't exist?
Our system contemplates a sort of adversarial process where someone takes on the burden. And it's a formal burden. And the fact that no one has taken on the burden or filed the contest in a formal way is important, because not only does it suggest that there may not be the proof there to pursue either one of these elements, the existence of malconduct or the effect on the election, we don't have a mechanism by which to properly, if you will, litigate it. And in answer to the question and to the issue of one vote is too many, I want to make sure that I've been heard. One vote may be too many as a philosophy, but if you were to apply the standard that one vote was too many and fail to certify an election, do you know what we'd be doing? We'd be having elections over and over and over again, because there will always be disenfranchisement. That's the empirical evidence. So this process of filing a contest and proving it and showing the effect on the election enfranchises the candidates that were properly elected and spent the money, and every voter who came to the polls and voted, and all of the resources that went into it. Before you can undo that, you have to show that it was outcome determinative, outcome affecting, or the democratic process itself suffers for that reason. Am I answering your question?
Yes, sir, you are. And one more question for you, and this is, and I'm going to read it for the audience who hasn't had an opportunity to read your report. And it's just for clarification, because I am a little bit confused, but it says, the result of a recount affect only the proper ballot count in an otherwise valid election. In circumstances where the outcome of the recount changes the numerical count to the point of changing the result with respect to a particular candidate or other electoral issue, the recount does not invalidate the election. What I read that to be, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm asking for clarification. How I read that to be is that, and I'm just going to use this, is that if there was a recount and Mr. Horniman did actually beat Mr. Sullivan, how could the election be valid if the recount shows otherwise to what we certified?
When we do have a contest, there can be any number of things that are alleged. It can be that, as has been alleged in this case, many, many voters never got to vote. So all those voters who didn't get to vote, all those disenfranchised people who didn't get to the polls and their votes weren't counted, will never be counted in a recount, will they? Those votes are simply not in the data. So, in order to capture that problem, if you wanted to, you would have to file an election contest and have a new election and prove that the number of votes that weren't counted because people weren't there was sufficient to change the outcome. When we do the recount, what we do is we recount from the database of the election that we have that is valid, and if it changes a particular election, a school board member, a mayor, a proposition, then so be it. But the body of the data itself is the same. And so the burden to ask for a recount doesn't require all these things that we require to start over. And that's the difference. And that's why when you file an election ballot recount, you're not filing a contest.
So if the election result turned out that they did a recount and you had a flip, whether in a proposition or in a candidate, that candidate would then still be considered the winner in the recount.
As I heard the motion to certify, and as the law requires, the motion to certify is subject to the recount. So nothing you do tonight to certify the election can undo a valid recount, because your certification must, as a matter of law, be subject to the recount.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Patumis.
And just a quick statement. One of our country's founding principles was the rule of law. And I just got done reading a biography of John Adams, and one of the things he said is that this nation must be a nation of laws. And so I feel duty-bound to follow the law as it is written, and I'll be voting for certification.
Ms. Osiander?
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. That was a point I wanted to pursue, too. I want to be real clear here. One of the allegations is that these machines don't work right. So if we do this recount, as the motion called for, and there is a flip from the announced results, exactly what happens? Does the person who flipped then become the winner, even if we certify otherwise?
Mr. Wheeler, would you like to answer that question?
Well, I'd like to know that.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Osiander, if the Assembly would indulge me, I would prefer to defer that question to Mr. Patuminis, since that was part of his analysis as your counsel on the matter.
I think we need to know the answer to that. So.
Yes.
All right, so we certify anticipating the winners that are listed, but if the recount shows otherwise, then the new data rules.
Yes.
Thank you. I do want to say that this has been an extraordinarily painful election, and I believe it's been an embarrassment for the city, the way that it has been run. I have to share with you, though, the way I operate and the way I work. I have been now in city government for almost 20 years, which astounds me to say. And I have taken part in some very emotional and very difficult situations. I think about teacher strikes of years past. And the big reason I think I've stuck with government so long is I believe very strongly that words matter. And as such, I was on the school board policy committee virtually every year of my service on the school board. I ran for this particular office because I was very interested in a particular title of municipal code called Title 21. I wanted to change the words. My experience also is that when things get emotional, when things get difficult, that's the time you slow down and you pay a lot of attention to process, and you try to follow the rules as clearly and distinctly as you can and to listen as carefully as you can. I know there are people out there who've been intensely frustrated at our pace. For me, the pace is a little bit reassuring. I don't want to make mistakes here. I want to do it carefully and thoroughly. And I want to also assure you that no matter how this vote goes out tonight, this effort will continue. I've committed to it. Many of us have committed to it. We have some changes that need to be made, and I want to do all I can to assure the citizens of this town that the changes will be made.
Seeing no one else in the queue, I do want to share a little sentiment. If anybody thinks that I'm having a great time sitting in this chair this evening, you're greatly disillusioned. I haven't enjoyed anything in the last month, and I've spent more time being counseled by attorneys than you can possibly imagine to make sure that I did this and I handled this according to code. And I understand the comments that some of my fellow assembly members are making in regard to following the law. But there's something inherent in me that I have to follow the law. If I don't obey this one, then which is the next one that I'm going to choose isn't quite right. And I think that there were a lot of people who spent a lot of time writing our municipal code. Do we need to do a lot of work on Title 28? There is absolutely no question about it. And that's the promise that I will make, is that during my tenure as chair, we're going to work and make sure that we can promise you this is never going to happen in this community again, ever. And I have got Ms. Drummond in the queue. Harriet?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I apologize. As you know, listening by telephone to this meeting is very difficult to do, and I had the phone on mute listening to the web stream. I appreciate the recent efforts of you, Mr. Hall, to find an independent investigator, and I'm sorry that this body failed to help you in that search by turning down the resolution that I made with Ms. Gray Jackson on April 10th to begin that search. We might have had an investigator under contract by now to assist us in our quest for the truth. By now we might actually know if misconduct, fraud, or corruption might have had an impact on this election of April 3rd. Without that knowledge, I am not satisfied that this election is ready to be certified. I am going to err on the side of caution. An abundance of caution is not unconstitutional. I'm going to be cautious and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, I'm going to ask that you please vote.
Hello? Yes. My vote no.
That motion passes 8-3. I want to take just up a little bit more of your time and give you a bit more, let you know that we are working with a recount applicant, Hal Gas. Yes. Okay. We have a motion for immediate consideration with a no vote, and we already have a second. Please vote. Okay. You need. Got it. Okay. Please vote. Ms. Drummond? Okay. We seem to have lost Ms. Drummond. We've got a vote of 9-1 and 1 absent. I want to take a bit more time for the sake of the public to let you know we are working with a recount applicant, Hal Gazaway, and I personally called him this morning and had a conversation with him, basically stating my appreciation for the fact that the group stepped up and asked for this. It's something I've really been trying to get done for about 3 weeks, and did not have the authority nor the ability to do that. But this does give us the opportunity. This will be a hand count, and I think we're going to answer the question about how accurate the scan machines are. So I look forward to working and ensuring that we try to give some peace of mind one way or the other. Mr. Petumas, I can't thank you enough for what you've done, how quickly you did it for us. It is really an appreciation on my part, and I do want the body to know that we do have an individual that's going to look into the election process and the clerk's office. We're trying to get some technicalities worked out in regards to that. I hope to be able to share that name with you very shortly. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you.